Hello, everybody, and welcome to This Week in X, presented by Crushing Comics. I am here with Tyler, Harry, and Fariha to talk about X-Men number 19, out on the 31st of March, 2021. This is a big issue of X-Men, and it comes with our standard disclaimer. We're going to get into spoilers. We're going to really thoroughly discuss the plot of this issue to make sure everybody's on the same page, but also some of the plot threads that led to this issue and potentially anything else that comes to mind. So this will be a spoiler-filled discussion. All right, folks, X-Men 19. Let's not go too deep into thematic stuff, just reaction, like the way you felt when you turned the last page. And then we have so much to dig into. So starting with Tyler, how did you feel?
I think this is the third best X-Men issue that Hickman has had penned so far. Only two issues came to mind that surpassed this. If I'm going to nitpick on this issue, I would say the art is not as strong as it could have been. But that is really being nitpicky. I'm going to give this a 4.9 Hickman timeline out of 5.
Harry, how did it make you feel when you closed the final page?
Delighted. This is easily the best X-Men issue that Hickman's written. This is one of the best issues of this entire run. I've been kind of lukewarm on Hickman's X-Men personal series that he's been writing, which is crazy because I usually love this guy. I think he's one of my favorite writers, and this is the first issue where I was like, right, that's where has this guy been with this amount of detail and emotion and character and marrying, great character beats with the data pages in a way that actually complement one another instead of feeling kind of disparate from each other. I love this issue. It's like just a straight up 5 out of 5 for me.
All right. Fariha, when you shut the issue, how did you feel?
Very sad because of what happened in it, because of the content. And it was very it's a very high concept idea of I know we're going to talk about all the things that happened in there, but I think my key takeaway was what resurrection does. This kind of brought together so hard. I thought that X-Force was doing it better, but then I realized that that was child's play. That was thinking so pedestrian and just low level. This is what Resurrection Protocol means and how it is not what it seems, and everything there's so much about it. I agree with Tyler that this is the third best issue. Issue 6 and 7 comes to mind. 6 is always going to be my top. But the thing is, in terms of arc, this is easily the best arc in Hickman era post Hoxpox for me. I do have problem with the art. There's one page Laura looked horrible, but otherwise I would say that it's the story content wise 5 out of 5.
I actually read it much earlier than I usually did on the release date because I saw the buzz amassing and I was like, all right, let's get into it. If I'm going to hate it, let's just hate it early. I was just stunned by this. I mean, I was speechless when I closed the page. It took 10 minutes of staring into the blank Twitter square to decide what to even say about it. I think it's a masterpiece of Hickman. I think we could dig into story issues with it, art issues with it, but this is the thing that made me love him. I mean, let's not forget that I do and did love Hickman. I just don't always love what he does at Marvel. This is the thing that I love. This playing with huge scope, playing with different narrative devices, playing with emotional beats in a sort of oblique way that lets you feel the emotion instead of telling you what the emotion is, and not using repetition. I don't think he's as clever with repetition as he maybe believes himself to be, or the editors do. There are a couple moments in this that do call back to repetitive beats and framing things similarly to other things, but it doesn't do that straight up repeating of stuff, which has been so thematic in his run so far. And when I got to the end, I was speechless. I mean, it really made me feel something deep and really worry about the X-Men and their place in this world right now. And I think that's what you shoot for with a comic. I also, even though I have little nitpicks for it, I think I would say that it's perfect. Nitpicks are part of what made it what it is to make me feel the way that it is. So I don't want to change anything about it. So
there's
Harry.
No, there's just a really good feeling you can get at the end of some issues where you're just like, I feel like I read something special. And for the first time, that's what I got from this.
and Peter, have stated, throughout all our recording that he prefers POX over HOX. And
Yes,
it's more POX.
it's
than
POX-y,
anything.
baby. Yeah.
It's POX-y.
Let's
POX-y,
get
baby.
POX-y up in here. Because POX, I mean, I think we could talk about that as sort of the first theme before we get into all the phases. We're going to tackle each phase, which I call each data page here one of the phases, right? Is that it's playing with the idea of a timeline, a sequence of events, and it's doing this really interesting thing where Hickman tells us everything that will happen in the sequence, and then he shows us. The pages that come after each one don't cover every plot beat, but they kind of illustrate the why of the plot beat. And every time he very carefully leaves out at least one of the plot beats in his retelling, which is a very Hickman sort of thing, which is this Rashomon effect we always talk about with him of like, well, that thing we're going to leave as a mystery, and maybe different people might have gotten different things from it later. That to me is what makes it POX-y. Not that it's like future technology, whatever. It's this playing with the fracturing of a narrative that to me, and giving us the information with one hand, but then obscuring some of it with the other hand. Fariha?
But that's what I'm saying though. Like one of the thing I felt like the reason I was so like whatever in POX though is like I felt like there was all this information was given, and we were not seeing the consequences of that right away, and we had to wait for it. Then you were like, oh, okay, I guess by then you forgot a lot of other things unless you were rereading it. But over here, that wasn't necessarily the issue. Like, it was like information was given, this was happening, you saw it, you understood what it meant, and you moved on. I think that's something that was missing in POX, but present here.
Don't just see it, you feel it. Like having those data pages show you what happens, but then the art makes you care and like evokes this mood of like dread and then hope all at the same time. It's like they're speaking to each other in such a cool way.
Right.
Sorry. I'm going to be very positive this issue.
I completely agree. I mean, with what you guys said, and also I think there is this thing about Hickman doing repetition. I feel like it is because of the COVID thing that messed up his schedule, and he's just writing fillers, and he's not good at writing fillers, so he's like let's just repeat this, and I'm going to add a bit here, add a bit there. So
it always feels like an overworked writer trying to kind of buy time a little bit. That's always the impression I get from that repetition in this series especially.
All his filler issues feels like he wrote them while taking a dump. Literally. Like it's literally, it does. Like just go read like X-Men 17. Like, it was like a couple of months ago. Good. And we're like, he can read like he can write that while taking a dump.
Yeah.
Well, I also think back to 5, which was the beginning of this, which it was before we were doing the show, but 5 it just had so many of those pages of basically like this trio of X-Men riding the elevator down to the vault, or the person in the vault kind of looking at that there's something happening. And at the time, people wanted to make it out to be so significant. But now that we've got 500 more years of material, people kind of assumed it would make it more significant. It feels less significant to me. I feel like
totally does.
Like, I would have rather have skipped everything we got in that last issue in 18 and just had this be like double length, but so again, you can't change what got you to the present. Maybe the reason we love this so much is because we experienced those other issues the way that they were.
That's actually the side I'm on. I actually think this makes 18 read a little better, not for terms of like plot consequence, but for getting into Synch's voice and head and kind of planting the seeds for these connections. Because that's what I love about this issue is that, it has big plot beats, but a lot of it is just about these 3 characters and seeing them kind of grow and change. And that's like such a more personal, interesting focus. So I think we did need 18 is what I'm saying there.
Yeah, we do, because I'm jumping a lot ahead. The very last page will not work if we do not have page 5 of last issue.
Yeah,
because there is some mirroring and some repetition.
There's a mirroring,
but this matters. This has like impact. It's an incredible final page.
Yeah,
Well, let's start going sequentially through this. So there's 4 phases here, and I'm calling the first phase into the city. So we're fresh off of the conflict in 18. The team almost was immolated by this, explosion by one of the children of the vault, but they make it away, and they're assuming the children of the vault think they're dead. So we get a little bit of a preamble here. The entire narration of the issue is in Synch's voice, but after it establishes that they survived the blast, then we go to the first one of these data pages to start this rhythm of data page and then illustration. And the thing that we learn here is that the first 50 years were the longest, which seems to indicate that this is the first 50 years that we're experiencing here. And this is just them figuring out how to live in the vault. They set up this command and control area in one of the quadrants of the outer ring. They figure out they cannot get messages outside. They cannot breach the temporal bubble, even though they have this forge gadget. And that something about Darwin's adaptations implies that their time is definitely moving differently from the outside. So that's kind of the stated as facts, taken as fact stuff. Then things get a little bit interesting. The couple of things I want to pull out here is time debt inversion. I don't think they ever explain what that means. And then there's this concept of that the children of the vault are on 2-month cycles, 2 months on, 2 months off. And that the X-Men are, during the season of night, they haunted the dreams of the sleeping children. And this goes on for 24 months before they have mapped all the quadrants and locate the city brain. So before we get to the end of this phase, which is a mutant incursion and detected, what do you think about this initial discovery phase, Tyler?
I mean, the time debt inversion, right? I mean, just judging by the way it's named, a debt is something that you owe, and so instead of owing time, they are earning time because they are inside the time bubble and they are moving faster than what is happening outside. So they are gaining time in that sense because in issue 5, Cyclops says, it has been about 3 months or something since they went into the vault. And how long is that? That is 500 plus 530 something years. So they are earning time. It's a time debt inversion. So instead of losing time, they are in the time bubble, they are gaining time with respect to what's happening outside. So I think that is all it meant. I'm not 100% sure. And also, the other thing I kind of noted is that why did they skip the 4th sector, the 4th quadrant? They mapped 1, 2, 3, decided to bypass 4 and go into the city, into the inner city. So
yeah, I feel like the implication was that there was something dangerous there. I don't know, Harry, what did you think?
Well, I just, speaking more broadly, I like how there are so many questions and kind of unfilled little avenues and corners that are set up by the data pages and the art. And it kind of, it's not like it's sloppy, but it just gives it this feeling of being so broad and so much time. And there's been so much that happened that we can't even get to all of it. But these are just the highlights that, you can connect to emotionally. So it's a kind of thing where like the lack of answers didn't frustrate me. I actually think it added to this feeling of endlessness that they're living through.
Completely.
And the only other thing is just, it's not really like a story point, but just the line during their season of night, we haunted the dreams of sleeping children. That's an incredible
see
line.
Children too, right?
It's just such like, it's just a great Hickman line. It just adds like this feeling of dread. It's so good.
Fariha, what did you think about this first phase?
So the thing is, like, I think the vault is probably one of the scariest thing I've ever seen, like a concept wise, like, it just like impenetrable. And when you go in there, there's no way out. And it just like nonstop nightmare in there. So I think from that point of view, I was kind of like really like always kind of very scared. Like my heart was pumping fast as I was reading through them. But one of the things, like 2 things pointed out, like, when I read time debt, I mostly understood it as like they're trying to outrun time, but time will come to get the debt from them eventually. Like,
but
that it's like
inversion.
I understand. So the inversion part kind of threw me off. I didn't know what that means. Yeah, but the thing is, like, I was thinking that the time debt means that they are trying to trick time, but time is one thing that will not forget, that it will come to come to roost, you know. Now obviously when you think about, oh, they have resurrection protocol, so what does that mean, you know, for them? Because it's not like they're just not regular people who are just have a finite number of time, they can just be resurrected again and again, but what does that mean for them? So I think that's an interesting concept that's not necessarily, you know, I am thinking that it's probably going to be explored in X-Men 34 or X-Men 35 or something down the line. And so that's what I was kind of going at it. But the other question I had, those are these timelines written by the Vault? Is it created by the Vault from Darwin's brain later on?
I feel like it is a reconstruct, because these databases are all Krakoan, so they are a reconstruct of Synch's memory.
I think they're the after action report. I did have that thought for you at one point when it kind of skips over when Darwin was captured, and we hadn't read the full issue yet, and I was like, oh, it must be gleaned from Darwin, and then they don't know, but then it kind of made sense at the end, like, oh, it's actually Synch's recollection because he doesn't know what happened to Darwin in that time. So as we discussed time debt inversion, I think I came to a new conclusion, which is that when the X-Men are on the outside and the Children of the Vault are in the inside, Children of the Vault accumulate evolution so quickly that they are coming out before the X-Men can even prepare, right? So the X-Men have a time debt because they can't evolve as quickly as the Children of the Vault. But that has been inverted now because the X-Men are on the inside, and they discovered that the Children of the Vault actually have really lengthy incubation. They have whole months that they're dormant. And so it's kind of like the idea that the X-Men now have the upper hand because they live their life fully, and they're having more time to plan and to act and to evolve, especially given Darwin's powers, while the Children of the Vault are slower. So they've inverted the time debt advantage that the Children of the Vault usually have on the X-Men. Am I saying the same thing Tyler said? I can't even tell anymore.
No, I mean, not really, because I'm comparing to inside the vault and outside the vault. You are comparing the mutants and the children inside the vault.
They've inverted the time debt advantage that, okay, well, three, at least two very good theories. So a couple of other things to pull out here. Actually, before I do, I agree with Fariha. You know, Marvel has a few of these time bubble situations. There's the World from Morrison's New X-Men. There's the Captain America by Remender. I think that's different than the World, right?
No, that's different because that's kind of a timeline.
My point is that there's many of these things at Marvel, but this feels the most sinister and scary to me as well, because the whole, as they remark at the beginning, the Vault is a self-healing world. It's the only one of these worlds where everything is in concert with each other. And some of these other worlds we see things are evolving, things are fighting, things are warring, there's evolution happening. The world is a system that all is working itself together in concert. And we have these three foreign bodies. They're a virus in the system. And it's like, is the system going to work to locate them? Everything there is connected and wants them to be healed, i.e. exposed, removed, or used to the better of the system. That to me is what's so creepy about this compared to all of those other time bubbles, which are fine, good stories, but not as creepy as this for me. Well, I want to pull one more thing out from phase one and then we'll move on. So as they're mapping the vault, they find these cradles of growth that have this 2 month on, 2 month off period. And I mean, it's visually incredibly similar to the Krakoan. They comment on it, but just to see it with all these red bulbs with people inside them, it just looks like the eggs in Krakoa. And they at some point encounter a teleporter, Horadar, and they preserve his DNA in a stasis pod so Synch can continue to access it. This is one of those things that we're told, but we do not see. And this continues in the data pages. Synch kind of grabs a couple of people's DNA to replicate it later. It seems kind of significant to me because isn't that kind of what's happening in X-Force?
Well, Sinister, right?
Yeah, I mean,
kind of like Sinister doing it.
No, but from the best.
It so often happens to mutants is kind of my point. Like so often we see this plot point used against mutants where they're being captured and they're being used. And here's mutants using kind of a tool of the oppressor in a way on the Children of the Vault.
I look at it more as
burn
just
them
like
down.
No holds barred. Like we are going to do anything to survive in this haunted house kind of place. Like it just shows the starkness of the conflict to me.
I mean, it's not just, the other thing is also, it's not just the visual similarity of the Krakoa to Arbor Magna. So I mean, there is also the talk about the brain of the city, right? So I mean, for me, I think the equivalent would be the Krakoa's brain, because Krakoa is living, right, and you can
Mhm.
communicate with Krakoa. And then I mean, the thing that I cannot sort of there is no equivalence would be the power nodes of the city. I mean, I briefly thought about Krakoan gates, but that doesn't really map exactly
Th-
to
They're
what it
still
is.
incredibly. They're framed more similar than not to Krakoa in this, which is like
Yeah.
I think very much the point.
Yeah.
So one thing I did wanted to ask though, and I think now is probably a good time to ask this question. Like, if the story was told from the point of view of the children, right?
You could,
You would think that these people are just straight up villains, right?
Yes.
Like,
yeah,
yeah,
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
they would be like straight up villains.
Yeah, because
So
they invaded the city, they started killing them, and they were like trying to stop them.
and
They're
to
a
me
ghost story.
but to me this is significantly better mutant story to tell. Is like when they're going up against someone who is better than them versus when they have to punch stupid racist dirtbag humans who have no power and somehow they can up them. It's like F that nonsense. I absolutely hate that. But this is something I like. I'm like, yeah, even though they're the human in this scenario, go burn them. Like, kill them all. So
Swing
just
away.
wanted to bring that.
We're going to move on to phase 2 now, the second data page, which I am calling myself engagement, because it has to do with them. Finally, they've been sneaking into the cradle, and they've discovered over time that there's one child of the vault that is awake when the others are asleep, Madre. And they confirmed the vault technology is actually very similar to Krakoa. And in one of these discovery missions, they're detected. And as part of that detection, in order to, again, try to throw the children of the vault off, they leave behind Darwin's arm. Which I personally would have left Synch's arm. I don't know. It's under pressure. You don't really have a lot of time to decide whose arm to
Yeah.
slice off. So they left Darwin's arm. And this turns into a big problem. In this tactical moment, though, they discover some things, or through time, they discover that there's different child classes. They discover that there's an evolutionary plan. They discover that there's a vault shield that's not just the chronal shield, but also a shield that's preventing them from going through. And if they go through, it's going to make them lose their mutant ability. And so, but while they're discovering all these things, the children now know they're there. And so finally, they have a breakup, which we do not get to see really very much of here. They eventually come back together. And when they come back together, that is when Darwin is captured. There's a lot in here, but so feel free to tackle any of it, starting with Tyler.
I mean, that's the one thing that I noted was the fracturing part as well.
Yeah.
Like, what happened? Why did Wolverine hunt alone? Why is Synch, trying to finish the construction of the stasis alone? And Darwin evolves, of course, because he's being isolated. He's by himself. What happened? And the thing is, because we are dealing with like 500 plus years of memories, did Synch forget, or forget because of the long time, or did he forget intentionally because it is painful, because he's isolated by himself? So I mean, we don't get the answer to that, but I thought it was something that is kind of planted there. There are things there, I think, which I suspect will come back to the unreliability of
Unreliable.
the narrator. Even though this is memory, but even memory can be slightly different from what actually happened, because you remember things that are at the extreme but not in the middle. So you remember the good stuff very clearly, you kind of remember the bad stuff clearly, but like the very mundane stuff, you don't. I mean, it kind of just flows into one another. So yeah, I mean, this part, I thought the really enjoyable part is to see at least for me, the older Laura, Synch, and you know, and the oh, I forgot his name, Darwin.
Darwin.
Sorry.
Older Laura gives me major Fariha energy in that one panel. No,
No, don't say that.
that's the
I mean,
one.
even
That's the
though her
panel you
hair is-
didn't like. I love it with the gray streak in the
She-
air and the face.
She looks great.
Yeah, she
No,
looks like
but
she's gonna
like-
just totally murder somebody.
No, neck down is fine, but her face.
Well,
I was
Azra
not- I'm
can't
like,
draw
that's not a-
faces. I don't know why
Yeah,
they
I'm like,
they should
ugh.
just have somebody else come in and draw all the faces after he does the rest of the issue.
You
Anyway,
can draw Synch
Wait,
just fine.
hold on. Does she not remind you of Anna Paquin in X-Men
Oh, yeah.
movie? Rogue?
Yeah, a little bit with
just
the hair.
because of how limp her white streak is compared to Rogue's
Yeah.
curly
No,
hair.
Yeah,
but no,
I know.
it actually reminded me more as Velvet by Ed Brubaker.
Yes, it looks a
Ah,
lot
yes.
like Velvet.
It's,
a lot.
it's like
That's
it's
true.
exactly like
Absolutely.
Velvet. Yeah, but then I was like, that doesn't like it doesn't look like Laura will grow up to look like that. That to me, I mean, it looks badass, no doubt. But it's I'm like, the face. I'm like, who is this? If I,
I just want somebody to go through with a little eraser and just take off that line he puts on every single chin. It makes me crazy. All right, Harry.
Oh,
Art,
I'm
let's
not
put
gonna see it.
put that aside for a second. What do you want to pull out from this phase 2 of engagement?
I just think like it's interesting where they start to become more disparate and you kind of see more plot kind of developing. But like the part I really liked on the data page is Wolverine and Synch endure together, which is like I feel like that's kind of like being a very subtle, understated way of showing like how these two are starting to grow closer and kind of carry on and what have you. And I think it's like just an interesting way to have, you know, that plot point get developed and then have the art just kind of get more of the emotion across. But yeah, I think there's also a lot of uneasiness when they all get separated when Darwin disappears, because it's like, you know, it's something sinister is happening, something bad is going on, and I was just really invested in the drama of the moment.
Well, and I want to make clear that they come apart before they lose Darwin, right? They hunt just for people listening and following along. They separate and all do their own thing. Wolverine hunts, Synch finishes the stasis, Darwin evolves. Then they come together. Then they lose Darwin and Wolverine, and Synch is by himself. And then eventually Synch and Wolverine come back together. So Fariha, anything else that you want to pull out of phase 2 before we go into that third phase, which I would call the isolation phase?
I think that the couple of things is like it's kind of follows the narrative of like the team building stages. So you form, you storm, then you norm, then you perform. So it's kind of. So I felt like
that's a thing. That's a business thing. People have never heard of it before.
Yeah, I'm not.
I don't love it, but it's a thing.
I know.
Yeah, it's a thing. And to be honest, a lot of time you'll see it happens. Even when we started X of Swords, like when we started doing this, there was stages of that you can see. So I feel like they were, because a lot of things were not going right, they just kind of like slide it down to kind of like having a storming, and that's why they probably broke up. And I think the reason it's not in there, I thought that it was probably because Synth was the cause, and that's why he didn't want people to know about that. The other thing I want to say though is that there is this one page where they show the children evolving, like it started off with one and then second, but the one right above that whole eye thingy, that is like the same exact design from Basilisk when Scott was in Age of X. It's the same mask. So I was like, oh, like it's the same shape, it's not the same color. I'm like, oh, what is that? What is Scott doing there? So then I was like, oh no, that's not him.
Well, it's also very visually parallel to the way they do Krakoa's face. Not the same design, but there's a lot of visual callbacks in this. Yeah,
I mean, for me, I think my nitpicking part is actually this page, because I feel like the first gen, second gen, and third gen, except for Serafina, the other three and the big guy beside her, the other three didn't really change too much. I mean, they changed in color.
Yeah,
the guy with the flame
costumes.
head just changed the costume and the head becomes smaller. So this is the nitpicking part of me that I think like maybe a more I don't know whether this is specified by Hickman, but but I was hoping like, you see a little bit more drastic changes when they upgrade the children from first gen to third gen.
And it actually looks like more like a fashion change because the season change. It doesn't look like there was an actual upgrade because the thing is, because you don't see their power usage, you don't see it. And I'm like, okay, I guess you're like, well, we're gonna have our hair
change
tied now because we're gonna change our hairstyle. And I'm like, okay, I guess.
It looks like the artist like variants on the costume they didn't go with. That's really just like, and these were the other ideas.
So before we go into phase 3, the thing that really stuck out for me here, and many of you have teased at it, is that if this is Synch's after action report, don't you think a Cyclops would care about why the team broke up? It seems like a really big missing detail. If it was just to have them evade detection, they don't actually think that they're being detected anymore. And why would you say fracture, right? Fracture is not a word for like a willing going of separate ways. So it definitely feels like there's something that's like a little bit darker there that Synch is choosing not to disclose. And he's the only one who knows now because the other two don't have their memories backed up from inside unless he's the only one. So like this is what makes me a little suspicious. And I won't say that I thought that there was a darkness necessarily to the relationship we're about to get with him and Laura, but clearly there is a missing piece. And Hickman does not do this stuff by accident. I think at some point it's going to be relevant, even if it's just a little piece of relevancy, because why would you not say anything, Synch? So, okay. Now, what goes on is they assault the city because they realize they can't get through the shield. So maybe they're assaulting the city to try to break the shield, or because they know so much about what's going on in the city. But, in retrospect, it was obvious that they were ready for them and that they were after Darwin because they had understood his DNA. So now starts the third phase, which is isolation. So Darwin is captured, Wolverine is captured, and Synch is unable to rescue his friends, which means he doesn't have access to their powers anymore, which is a problem for him because he's going to start getting older. And so he steals some powers from some children that are around, including an earth-moving power, and he realizes, classic villain mistake, that the time bubble does not go underground. And so he somehow gets underground to exit the bubble and just hunkers down for a week to come back in, at which point over 100 years have passed. And then he is able to free Wolverine. And this is when they go on and endure, because they have to still figure out how to figure out what's going on with Darwin before they make their escape, which I would call phase 4, the extraction. So what do you all have to say? We'll start with Fariha this time, just so she can be first. What do you have to say about this isolation period where Synch has to be by himself for so long and then Synch and Wolverine endure?
I mean, I just want to know that how frustrated he must be. Like, we could have done this the whole time. Like, we could have gone on the whole time. Like, isn't that like that's one of the moment? I mean, I think this is a lot of the things. Like, I wish like some of this information that we were getting, instead of getting them in like chunks like this timeline, we actually saw them in like in images. Like, I think it would have probably brought a little bit more. Like, I feel like there was not, it wasn't enough that like to show the time pass. I was like, okay, as you're reading through that, I'm like, okay, I guess like, time flew. But the isolation part of it didn't grab me as much, because it was like him looking through a glass, then we come back and him looking through another glass, but with wider beard. And you're like,
yeah, okay. It could have used a page. It could have used a page to really show.
Yeah, instead of getting that part just through text, it would have probably made more emotional a beat, that knowing that without them, he is actually in a worse off shape.
Harry?
Well, I already gave my phase 3 thoughts, thinking it was phase 2, so I'm a little embarrassed. But no, I think the design of the phase 3 data page is actually really neat when you have like the gray pullout when he somehow finds a way like through. I just think it's designed in a really cool way. And I agree with Fariha. I do think it's kind of like the flattest visually is the segment of him just kind of hanging out, getting old in a box. But it didn't like take me away that much. Yeah, I was just like fully invested at this point. I was like gripped.
I was definitely in like page turning mode at this point, where I was like, and like I was in that edge of my seat, catching my breath, tense, full body tense kind of at this point. So I don't think I noticed this stuff as much in my first read. Tyler?
No, I mean the gray part is basically the part where he's outside the temporal bubble.
Right,
So
he's
he
out of
doesn't
sync
have-
to the time
yeah.
passage in.
It's awesome.
So
Yeah.
so it's like, okay, 100 years have passed inside the vault, and I don't know what happened, but you know, I'm it's just gonna collapse like the way Hickman collapsed Moira's life 6 and life 9, where he just shortened it and then just jump.
Mhm.
But I mean, I agree with the fact that, you know, he doesn't seem that old, but then for him it's just a week, not 100 years. So, and then later on it does show him like a little bit burnt by um because he doesn't have the healing powers. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is a little bit boring, but I think it is meant to show that time did not it's not that long for him. It kind of stood still for him, even though inside the vault 100 years have passed.
Right, and
Yeah,
time
but
keeps passing after he gets back with Wolverine, but really not that long past until he gets back with Wolverine, because he would die if he left too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. So basically, I think, you know, he got out of the bubble, but he's still inside the vault.
Hmm.
So it's just that, you know, he just doesn't have he doesn't die basically, because he doesn't have the healing power. He doesn't have the adaptability power of Darwin and Wolverine. So
Mhm.
So I think a thing that's kind of unsaid here is that Wolverine surely must have some intel after she escapes, even though she wasn't being kept with Darwin. When we know that, because it says Darwin cannot be located. So I think, again, there's a little bit of an obfuscation here. Clearly something has happened to Laura in this century. They didn't just have her in a room not feeding her. I'm sure they were doing something. And afterwards she has this like pink glowing psionic looking mask. And at first
It
I
looks
just
so
thought it
cool.
was a trick of the light in one panel, but she actually has it multiple times through the end of the issue, and it's just never remarked upon. So something's happened, something's different that we don't have a full explanation of. But they capture Sarah. So go ahead, Fariha.
No, I was just gonna say though, it was actually really disappointing though, because she was this was her life, being in captivity. Like her whole life was being in captivity, and then she was back in being in captivity, and now for a century. Like that really made me sad.
Sucks.
Yeah.
But now we
Not
go to
be
phase
flippant.
4, because they capture Serafina briefly and they copy her powers, which gives them full knowledge of the city. And they realize how critical their mistake is in this phase 4, which I call the extraction phase, because the children are using Darwin to fuel their generation number 4 expansion. Basically, they had projected they needed to get to level 3 in order to get rid of mutants, but then they popped out at level 3, saw that Krakoa was a thing, and went, oh shit, they had not evolved enough, and they had no way, they had no technology, they had no fuel to evolve past that. So they were stuck. They're in these like 2-day iterations, but they weren't making a step change, right? But Darwin and the ability to have Darwin lets them make step change, and Synch, in leaving them alone with Darwin for a week of his time, a century of their time, basically lets them crack how they're going to get to 4, which makes it critical that the X-Men escape. But here is something that is kind of remarked upon, but not fully remarked upon. They have to make sure that they don't have any remaining access to Darwin, not only because they want to make sure that he's not going to continue to be used, but because they want him to be able to be resurrected when they get out. They can't leave a Darwin inside. And one of these lines is, subject Darwin, final atomization and biomass seeding completed. Basically, they learn that the Children of the Vault have broken down Darwin and seeded his biomass across all of the Children of the Vault to get to this level 4 evolution. That's why they know it's time to get out of here, because they need to let the X-Men know, and there's no more Darwin to save. So before I turn into you, I'll say one last thing. This Darwin moment, very Hickman, reminds me of a certain other Hickman person who's used as a fuel for a thing, but I'll leave it to see if anybody around the panel wants to discuss that without stealing your thunder. Fariha, thoughts on this final extraction, which ends, by the way, with this suicide mission for Wolverine so that Darwin can be the one to get out, or I mean, Synch can be the one to get out, because Synch, useless in a fight without anybody standing around. So Fariha, what did you think about bringing it all home here with extraction?
Right. So the thing is, I think like there was like a meta commentary in there too, is like, now that Krakoa happened, all you writer, listen up, you cannot go back to it. Because we kept on talking about it. It's like the X-Men evolving, and you have to adjust your thinking to that. You cannot keep on writing that, oh, the Cerebro doesn't know anything. Stop that. Stop that. You know who you are. Stop doing that, because you have gone way past that. So that old things doesn't make any sense. So I think that's like, to me, I was kind of looking at it from that point of view, like, oh, this is like, there's like a meta commentary. Maybe there isn't, but I was having a lot of fun with it. But the thing is, it also shows that Krakoa is dangerous. Krakoa, like the mutants reuniting in Krakoa is actually going to work for them, maybe, I don't know. And then the children of the vault also kind of notice that. And then the very last thing, though, is like, are we talking about the very after?
Sure,
like,
yeah, I
he's
mean, this is the
resurrected?
end.
Yeah, okay. No, I mean, the whole thing about what it meant, what love means, what relationship means. Like, they were in such a situation where it's like the human words don't mean anything for them. Like, it was like way before that. And also the fact that we kept on talking about, like, if Phoebe wasn't there to transfer all the information to what's his name, to Quentin, their love wouldn't grow. And the same thing happened here. It's like there was no way to transfer the information. So one of them is have all this information or have all these feelings, while the other doesn't have anything to connect to, which is also very Winter Soldier and Black Widow thing. And it just repeated itself over here, and it's very sad. And knowing what Laura has gone through and how difficult it is for her to make human connection, it's even sadder when you think about it from that point of view. It's like she had all of this and now she will never know.
Harry?
Yeah, I think what really just blows me away with this issue is how it concludes both keeping this issue's feeling of dread and moodiness with what happens to Darwin, and just the realization that, this threat they were so scared of is something they kind of brought about by even getting on this mission in the first place, which kind of keeps it kind of scary. That's great. But then, just I think the final thing here of, Darwin, Synch reaching a point where he, comes to the conclusion that, it's living for someone, not dying for someone, is what love is. That is just such like a great encapsulation of what this era is doing with Krakoa and Endless Life and what have you, and this kind of positivity and a focus on more wins and what have you. Where you're right, Fariha, where it is sad, but at the same time, there is something kind of beautiful and uplifting to the final page where he's still smiling, and that feeling of hope is still there even through all of this hardship they just went through. And I'm a major sucker for kind of like bubble time stories where someone goes through so much stuff and kind of can't even express it to anyone else, like the Doctor Who or Edge of Tomorrow even. And I just think this is another really good example of it. I think it's just like a book that balances plot and thematic like resonance so well.
Tyler?
I mean, there's so much that I kind of want to talk about here.
Go ahead.
Go, you have the floor.
Do it, man.
Yeah, I mean the thing is this. This is the classic case of like I mean, not really classic, but this is a kind of like the time paradox thing, because you were so afraid of something happening, you want to stop it, and by trying to stop it, you actually made it happen. So this is like, I mean, this is really used. I mean, it's used really well here. And the thing is this will propel Krakoa into the next stage, I think, because now Krakoa knows that the fourth gen of the Children of the Vault are coming, and how ironic it is that the children has to use mutant gene to leapfrog them from third to fourth. I mean, they are like, oh no, we are much better than mutant. I was like, no,
Not
you
anymore.
do need the mutant. Yeah, not anymore. So I feel like we are either going to see a whole lot more mutant machines, or we are going to start to see chimeras coming into play here. And then the other thing I kind of want to talk about is that comment about is that Moira knows that just depending on evolution will not work. because that is too slow. In life 6, that's what the post-human told Moira. Say, you guys think that, just by adapting to the environment, you are one step ahead. But no, we can do so much better. We leapfrog over your evolution by having the Sentinels and then the Nimrods, which delay the time for you. And then for the children of the vault, they don't even need to delay the time because they're in the vault, which is accelerated time.
They're creating time debt for everyone else.
So that's the thing. So for them, it's like, so I think this whole thing plays into such the larger theme of like Hickman, and that is really one of the reasons why I love this issue so much, because of all these thematic things that you really don't need to know if you have not read POX for some reason.
What?
I mean, this issue.
Why are you reading this?
Who didn't read POX? Who's gonna find you?
No, I mean, come on. Without reading POX, where are you here?
No, but even without reading POX, right? You can frame this as a kind of a love story, between Synch and Laura inside, an extended period of time. I mean, as an unnaturally extended period of time. Harry mentioned about Doctor Who and things like that. I actually thought about one episode of The Magician, which is I think season 3, episode 5. The title of the episode is Alive in the Day. Alive in the Day. So it's just a flip of the word. But if you have not seen it, I'm not going to spoil it. I mean, I get a lot of feels from that episode, and it sort of transfer a little bit over here. And I mean, the very last page, of course, that is like, oh my God, so much feelings. But the thing also is that Synch now realizes that in I think issue 5, he went from he was like behind his cohorts because he died and they were moved on, and then now he's being reborn, but he has several lifetimes ahead of his cohort. So he changes his position, but he still kind of is in the same position, except that in his mind now he has come to terms with it. It's like, and the very last bit, of course, is like, how do you love someone when you cannot die? Because the mutants cannot die now. So you just live for them. I think I thought that was like so succinct and so, it's so well written. I mean, there's I don't know. I mean, that this last act is the one that propelled this from, say, a 4 to a 4.9.
You're getting me emotional, Tyler.
So one thing I think, like from Tyler's point of view, I think, because I kept on saying death is not the worst thing that can happen to someone. It really isn't, and this is a proof of that. Like, it doesn't matter that you have conquered death. It really doesn't matter. You will love someone for hundreds of years, and they will forget. And you will have to live with that memory. Like, nothing is, I don't think there's anything worse than that. Like, that not like that, I think is like far, like repercussion of that is like further, like, on someone, even though he's smiling. I don't know why, but the thing, why is he smiling at the end of it? What do you know?
He loves, the person he loves is back. There. It's nice.
So, I know, like, but the thing is, so I think like it's morally, it's like, okay, I knew the first go around what to get her, how to get into her hurt. So I know how to do it again. No,
I think it's like she's back.
And it's the same person.
I have time.
Right. It doesn't.
Time.
I don't think it matters if they fall in love with each other or not. I think it's enough that she got revived for him.
She's still
in that
same
moment.
Person. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So one question I do have though is like, how is Laura, the other Laura, truly dead? Because how do you kill a Wolverine?
Well, she had no powers.
She doesn't have her powers
because they went through the shield first.
Yeah.
Which is probably the only. They could have kept her alive. We don't know. I mean, it's one of these themes of the Krakoan age, right? It's one of these themes that maybe she is still alive. They don't really have proof, but this is kind of an X-Force caliber mission, so they got approval to revive her, even though there's no proof of death.
And it's interesting where this is kind of dealing with the same stuff that X-Force is doing a little bit with Quentin and Phoebe. But I gotta be honest, just with kind of like relationships and possibly memories being lost and what have you, I think this kind of does it far better, which I wouldn't expect from a Hickman book in terms of emotion.
Because
Harry.
you gotta be the fourth generation of writer. Can't give these ideas to a third generation.
Oh yeah,
Like,
Harry, I mean,
yeah.
you being the other, I mean, or the resident Who fan here, this issue
Yeah.
actually reminds me of the Dr. Trout Spoon episode.
Oh man, you're right. Oh my gosh, I
Right?
didn't even
I
think
don't
of
know what
that.
any of that means.
No, I know.
This side
because
was
I'm,
like,
I'm not,
yeah,
I'm not
Yeah.
trying to spoil it for anyone. That's why I just want to have reference a
Well,
little bit.
Also, Hell Bent and Heaven Sent, but we can talk about that off.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing.
Viewers, let us
Join
know if
Tyler.
you want Tyler and Harry's who chat.
Yeah.
Oh.
Tyler and Harry
Guild
chat who. Let us know because we have the power to make that happen. Okay,
10-hour discussions.
So look, wow, I kind of need to start taking notes during the show because you all said so many things that I want to dig into, and I can't possibly because you all said so much great stuff. I'll just try to pick out a few little things. First of all, I think the whole Darwin being subsumed and turning into the fuel for everybody, for me, was very the Human Torch becomes the sun from Secret Wars. It's a very, even visually,
yeah.
it looked a lot like that. So I was waiting to see if somebody chimed in with that. The other thing, gosh, there's so much. I'm staring at the last page here because I had it up while you were all talking about the last page. And there's really something in the way that he's looking at her and she catches him looking at her. On a surface level, it's very like, oh, now he's just going to be like her, like incel stalker guy who's like, love me, Laura, love me. But I think there's another layer to that, which I think we all got to, but I want to make it explicit. It's in the way he told the story about his dad. It's I'm trying to find it in specific here. And the way he tells the story is that he's looking, I remember my dad catching me looking at him as he was looking at her, his mother. And I remember what he said, son, most people don't know how to explain it, but I surely do. So listen closely. And then he talks about the difference between caring for somebody and loving for them. But it's expressed in terms of this moment of somebody kind of catching you looking. And that's what that last page really was for me. It was making literal Synch in that moment as an adult being caught looking at this person that he loves. We as the reader are Synch in that moment. Synch caught his dad looking at his mom. We caught Synch looking at Wolverine, and Synch turns and delivers his version of the monologue to us. That's why it looks like that. It's not any, I mean, maybe they'll still fall in love. That's not the point. The point is this is an amazing comic book issue, and Hickman and Azrar pull off an amazing rhetorical device here because they've flipped the direction of the conversation that Synch is recalling. Guess what? If somebody hadn't read POX, and now we're like 2 years past that, we're about to be 2 whole years, there's over 100 issues, I would actually hand them X-Men 18 and 19 and be like, if you like what's happening here, especially for older fans who love Laura, who like, wow, Synch is back, or like, I love Darwin and Pad's X Factor, I would just hand somebody these 2 issues and be like, if you get this, if this rings for you, you will like this whole era. This is the whole thing in a tiny little compressed bouillon cube of story.
It's remarkable in that way. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. It's like there's so much of like the current themes and emotion and heart in these 2 issues. It's pretty wild how much stuff is in here thematically. Guess what, y'all? If every issue had this much stuff in it, we would talk this long about every issue, and that's what you would get. Because if you remember back to POX, those were 2 hours long for every single issue, and we have no regrets. And it's packed with analysis. Plus, we had Zach there too, which takes you to a whole different level of evolution. So to finally wrap this up, I think that's why I zeroed in so much on time debt inversion. And I think I got so much from our discussion. I understand it so better. The whole issue is about time debt inversion. To Tyler's closing point, Synch has now inverted his own time debt. They've inverted their time debt with the Children of the Vault. There's all of this playing with who was owed time, who had a surplus of time, and how that balance has been flipped. That's the whole point of this issue. Now we understand what time debt inversion meant. Yeah, I hope these issues are like this going forward, after the last 18, like if he can keep on this level of quality, I think we're in for something special. And I think Asgard could be a big part of that. Get some more emotion into this book because Yu's not as good as that.
Well,
And let's not have Scott Summers ever.
That has been our discussion of X-Men number 18. We are also going to have discussion separately of X-Men Legends number 2, so look elsewhere on the channel for that. And I think this, as much as any episode, is an illustration of what, Fariha?
X-Men is better when you read together.
Yeah, I mean, I came into this having put, and I know I don't usually say my score, I did put 5 out of 5 in my Peter's comic book spreadsheet, and I feel like I actually could raise it now after talking to the 4 of you about it if I had some score that was higher. So we want to thank you so much for being part of this discussion. Did we miss something? There was so much. This was so Hickman. So I want to ask you, what thing did you catch or did you appreciate or thematic thing did you latch onto here that we didn't even cover? Say it in the comments. Who knows? Maybe we have to get back together next week and talk even more about this issue. I don't think any of us would be upset if that was the case.
No.
So until then, thank you so much for being a part of this discussion with us. On the behalf of myself, of Harry, Tyler, and Fariha, this has been This Week in X, presented by Crushing Comics. Please be well.
Bye.